Welcome to Smart Branding, a podcast dedicated to branding, naming, and domain names. I'm Tatiana Bonneau, and with my guests, we try to help you create and grow strong, memorable, and meaningful brands online. I believe time is one of our most precious assets, and so I want to thank you in advance if you decide to spend the next 30 minutes with us. I promise to do my best to make those worth it. Let's go! So today my guest is Vanhishikha Bhargava. She's a content marketing strategist for B2B companies, and we're going to be talking about her background, content, and much more. So thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's great being here, Tatiana.
Let's start with a bit of a background. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how did you get into content marketing?
So I come from an engineering background technically, but I started out right after college, not knowing exactly what to do back then in 2013. So I was just, good with words. My mom's an English teacher. So good with words. I started out just writing things, simplifying technology, as I would call it, because back then there was no such term as digital marketing, content marketing, social media marketing. It was all under the umbrella of marketing. So I started and I started my journey with a product that was incubated by Ogilvy and Mather, and it was an analytics solution. So I just started with just writing certain collaterals for them, and eventually getting groomed into the industry by an amazing mentor, because he didn't just turn out to be a point of contact for a freelancer here in India. He actually focused on teaching me, because he was like, hey, you have a knack with technology. You understand that. You're able to simplify it. I'm going to teach you marketing. So I would say I was getting into the field was sheer luck and experiment, because I had 3 months in hand and I didn't know what to do. So yeah, that's how I entered here.
Oh, and I love the way that, because usually, marketing people are seen as more creative and like, the engineering technology side of it. I think it's not true, but most people see it as not creative. And so I think if you're into it, you can see that actually there is a lot of creativity there as well. It's just different, but it's a great way of putting it that, effectively that's what marketing is about. It's about, making sure that your product, your message, your service is understood. And so for it to be understood, obviously, the simpler it is, the better. So yeah, simplifying technology is a very good way to put it.
Exactly. I feel that also, the forte that you have in marketing and the kind of creativity that's required. So for instance, I have been in B2B SaaS for a very, very long time. But if you simply take me from this one domain to, let's say, direct to consumer brands, I may not be as creative. I'm strategic because I like technology. But if you put me in a completely different scenario, it's going to be a whole new learning curve for me, because that kind of creativity is not there. So I also feel that, the educational backgrounds that each of us come with make you better at one thing. There is this one person, for instance, that I know comes from a psychology background. The way she infuses empathy into a piece, I haven't learned that in 10 years. And she's only been working for, so it's taken me 10 years to get there. She can do it just offhand, just like that. So I feel that the creative parameters today are not gauged properly. They should be gauged on multiple parameters instead of just how good you are with vocabulary or how extensive your vocabulary is.
I think that's a very, very good point, because very quickly the amount of competition, the amount of content that's created, the amount of information that people can access, and the fact that especially if you're talking about digital products, they're by default, they're global, like however you cut it. So you are playing in a huge scene. And I mean, when people started having, blogs, it was more about SEO, I guess. It was like they weren't even thinking that much about it's for the end consumer. It's more like, let's stick it up with, some keywords so that search engines can find us. And a lot of people still think that's enough, up to date. And what you just said, it's like, no, you don't just need somebody who knows what they're doing, whose job it is dedicated to creating that content, but you need more than one person depending on what you want to communicate with that content.
And the funny thing is, I just had a conversation with somebody a couple of days ago, and we were talking about how content marketing, or let's say email marketing and SEO, are separate things. I mean, I understand the channels are separate and not everybody is great at doing everything. But if we go back to the core definitions, right? So the conversation that I was having was primarily around, hey, we just want to create content. We don't want to do SEO. But my whole point was, why are you creating content if you're not focusing even 20% on how it's going to appear on the search engine? And vice versa, it's true too. If you're just writing for the search engine, then you're not writing for the people. So I said, when did these two things become separate? Because when I came into the industry and when I was taught this industry, the meaning of it meant comprehensively, kind of create content which serves all purposes. Now, I think most companies, like you said, right, they just pick up a bunch of topics, stuff in the keywords, publish. And that's how marketing is mostly tackled these days. And it's pretty sad. And maybe that's one of the reasons why most of the information you find on internet or on social media is actually not accurate. There's so many loopholes to it. It's almost like a cut, copy, paste from video they heard, maybe something they read. So it's not stemming from actual experiences or actual experiments, like how we used to that, oh, hey, let's put a link in bio, or let's not put a link in bio. They used to be experiments, individual experiments. Now they're just, oh, it's 10 people said this, let me also do it. So I feel that marketing has just been sacked out of the entire mix. The whole core definition of certain things in marketing are just no longer there or understood.
Absolutely. And as you said, talking about copy-paste content, especially now with artificial intelligence, it's just so painful, the sort of a content you see down to, I mean, you can recognize it like so easily. And I'm like, what on earth are you doing? Like how it can be used as a tool. Yeah. But when you see that something was literally copy pasted, and as you said, it's not even accurate in some cases. So it's not, it's so disappointing to see as a user. You think, so like that company that I'm considering putting my money into, they couldn't be bothered to write something authentic. And if it goes beyond that, it's not even accurate. It's just, I don't know what people are thinking.
It's a LinkedIn post I published just yesterday, by the way, on how volume over quality has become the name of the game. Everybody's talking about publish every day, write every day. Nobody's talking about what are you writing. In the end, you're just diluting what you're writing.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Some myths about content marketing.
I'm sorry.
Some myths. What are the like most common myths that you find most often?
One of the most common myths, one that content marketing is just about writing blogs. I think that's an ick now with me, right? So most of the times when I'm talking to people, they're like, I get started with content marketing, and the number one thing they say is, we want to publish 20 blogs this month. So the conversation straight goes to blogs. I mean, what happened to strategy? What happened to writing your reader personas? That part, that chunk is just not spoken about, right? So I feel one of the icks and one of the biggest myths that I'm currently struggling with at the agency as well, where, when we're on discovery calls with certain prospects, and I have to try and explain to them that please don't go by the internet definition of content marketing. It's not just blogs. So definitely one of them is this. The second one, and I think the biggest one that kind of consolidates all others, is that content marketing works in silos. It doesn't. Your content marketing strategy is supposed to fuel your sales team. Do they have the collaterals they need to strike conversations with people? It's supposed to also fuel your support team or enable the support team. If the support team is facing 10 questions every single month, it is clearly indicative that you need it in your content marketing strategy. People just skip that. Why? It's the support team responsibility. It's not. It's supposed to work together. Email is supposed to work alone. What are they going to send in the email? They have to create some amount of content. So the siloed approach that everybody is right now taking to marketing, because like I said at the start, right, everything has now broken down into micro parts. One person is a copywriter, one is an email marketer, one is this. It's fine, but each of them need to speak with each other. It be like, hey, I just do emails, so I'm just going to write those 5 emails, and I honestly don't care what goes in it. That's that can't be the way things work. So I feel the siloed approach to marketing or content marketing, that, hey, this is supposed to get us results on its own. If you're not distributing, and that includes your email as a channel, it's not going to work. If you're not optimizing for search, now that's SEO, it's not going to work. If you're not pushing your content on social media, which is now called social media marketing, it's again not going to work. Where are you going to cater, or let's say, kind of promote your content? So I feel the whole siloed approach to creating content, or rather, let's say, getting started with content marketing, that's another myth that I have been trying to address pretty aggressively whenever we are in conversations, that it's not supposed to work in silos. It can't drive. Imagine relying only on the search engine crawlers to come index your site, crawl your site, and then show it up without you doing any effort on anything else. That's going to take ages. And people expect that, okay, we got started with content marketing. We've written 50 pieces. Now we don't rank. So why are we not ranking? So I feel that's one myth that consolidates all others now. So I've started to call it one.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating. And I had a conversation recently that was with somebody who was in a different area, but the feedback was very similar, that people in companies somehow, because when you spell it out, it actually, you're like, yeah, of course everything works together. So those people need to be talking and, communicating in a way to work in the same direction. Just how else is it going to work? But it's a very, very common problem. It's a very common problem. So yeah, for our listeners, I think it's something worth thinking about, that you all of those things have to be consolidated, which is where, that was going to be one of my questions, like, for somebody who hasn't thought about whether they need that at all, like what is a content marketing strategy, and at what point in your business should you be looking at developing that? And also, does it, like, do you set it out and, okay, that's our strategy, or how does it change in time?
Very good question. And this was one thing that I answered at STEP conference in Dubai. And very similar question, right? It was more like, when do we get started with it? When's the right time for it? And that's, again, all thanks to people thinking that content marketing is too slow to work, so I can't use it. Now, I'll give you an instance, 2 to 3 of them, very different ones, very different companies. Company stages. One wherein they had the logic of a product, but not the product ready. But thankfully, the stakeholder came with experience in marketing. So he knew that there was potential to it. So he wanted to get started with content marketing almost 7 months prior to when they would even release an MVP. There was nothing in hand. It was just a concept. And we were like, we're going to use content marketing, build an organic audience, and see what are they interested in the most. Tailor the MVP according to what we are getting traffic on, the success of it. In 3 months, they were able to establish so much authority, and in a competitive field like email marketing, right? So email marketing, the Klaviyo, ActiveCampaign, MailChimp, you can't beat them. Now you can't beat them. But we practically cracked the same market. We answered the unanswered. We didn't even have a product. We said, okay, fine, maybe you can use our logic on top of your existing product. So we brought people in as leads. And now when the product is ready, which is 1.5 years after, by the way, now the product is ready. So now we tell them, hey, you don't even need to use ActiveCampaign. You can use us, because people have been already working with us on workflows. So you can start with content marketing practically at any given time, but you have to be absolutely clear about what are you trying to accomplish through it. It cannot be that, hey, I'm just going to build an audience and I need an X amount of traffic. No, your strategy has to work towards taking that audience or taking that traffic towards the eventual product. and how are you going to use those insights towards your product. The second one, for instance, is a product that was in the market for almost a year, and very good reviews from customers. Everything was pretty stable. Now what they wanted to do was increase their share of voice in the market, because if you're not marketing, you're practically non-existent. So if I've told you about the product, you know about it. Otherwise, you don't know about it, right? So we entered and we started working with them at that point. And in today's date, apart from the best of reviews that they garnered in the first year, they are also known as the go-to source of information for everything and anything that comes under e-commerce subscriptions, for instance, right? So it can be at different stages. A content marketing strategy can be tailored to your stage, but depends on the goals that you align with it. And of course, how much of a resource allocation can you have towards the tactic? Because let's be honest, if content marketing is not being supported by, let's say, zero SEO efforts, zero email marketing, zero social media budgets, it will take time. It will go from anywhere between 3 to 6 months to go pick up on its own. But at the same time, if you are open to experimenting with formats, like for instance, a webinar somehow similar to this, or a podcast, and you're going very strategic with it, it scales beautifully and very quickly as well. So I would say the stage at which you get started with a content marketing strategy, it can vary, but definitely don't get started with content writing just because you didn't have the time to think through for a strategy, because all of that content is eventually going to get sidelined by a marketer when they eventually come in, or that content is to dilute your authority, because whatever that you're putting on the net, it's there unless you delete it. And also the age-old saying, right, the internet doesn't forget. Yeah, that still holds true. That still holds true. I can't be writing about content marketing today and then suddenly become a sales expert. No, I have 10 years of talking about content marketing. Now, if you tell me that, hey, I'm a sales expert, people are not foolish. Your audience knows. You never know who's who and who's talking to who. So definitely get started with writing unless you have at least a 40% of what we call a documented content marketing strategy in place.
And how does the process work? Like when somebody reaches out to you, how does it look?
In a typical scenario, we are usually reached out with through people who are experimenting or want to know if there is any potential for using content marketing to fuel their growth, right? So in this case, what we do is we look into their product, we ask them for their direct and indirect competitors. And then we gauge that, okay, if you're going against direct and we want to use content marketing, right? What are the supporting channels that we're going to require for distribution? What is the amount of competition? And we give them a projection of, okay, this is going to take 3 to 6 months. We recommend starting with this part. And sometimes that's just social media, by the way. It's not even content marketing. We say, let's get started with social media first. Gauge the market, gauge the topics, then move into full-fledged content marketing, which would be like creating those guides, etc. Because unless you know what cuts your competition, you're not going to really, be able to do things. So definitely understanding the product. Second, doing a very thorough competitor analysis. Direct and indirect. Indirect is something that I've seen too many people again skip on. Indirect is when you're actually addressing the same audience, but they may not have the same product or the same service. So you're not competing on the product, but you're still competing for attention, right? So that's something that most people don't account for. We do. So this takes up to almost a week or so. If the company has already done some bit of content, some bit of web pages, some bit of online presence, we also try and wrap up an audit in this first week, because we need to know what they did right, what might cause damage in the long run, and we need to get rid of before we start anything else. And, what kind of clarity do we really need? And at this stage, we are actually talking always to the stakeholders. Although, yes, having your point of contact, the content marketer that you brought into the team, the writer that you brought into the team, or the head of marketing that you brought into the team, great. But also having stakeholder alignment is important, because a head of marketing may say, hey, I want to rank for email marketing software. The stakeholder may say, hey, no, we just do email workflows. So the terminology changes. And since content marketing takes 3 months of building, you can't switch those terms so frequently that the audience doesn't even know. So the initial 2 weeks typically go into the audit, analysis, the SWOT analysis, and stakeholder alignment. Stakeholder alignment includes all department stakeholders, including sales and support. Many a times we get pushback on, hey, we don't have the time, if you could write questions, etc. We write down questions for them, the sales and support. They don't even answer those. So we give a pushback and say, hey, you know what? We're not going to work on the next steps. So if you really want to work with us, and because eventually they're going to ask you, hey, content is not bringing in sales. That's because you never gave inputs. Or the support team will say, we don't have an ebook on this, but you never said you needed it, right? So we try to get all of that done right in the beginning for absolute alignment. And then we identify which stage of the funnel do we want to start things from. There is too much conversation on the internet around, hey, flip the funnel or use the standard funnel, right? Go from top of the funnel to bottom of the funnel. And now there is this new term, almost like growth hacking, which is flip the funnel. And then they talk about start with the bottom of the funnel. And I'm like, you can't generalize your strategies, for everybody. It's not one size fits all. Again, the alignment is what tells you where you need to begin. It could be bottom. Maybe there's nothing for the bottom. So you actually have to start at the top, like the email marketing solution that I talked about. So I think, understanding which stage of the funnel you are at and align it with the current goals for 3 to 6 months minimum. We ask for short-term goals. We ask for your mid-term goals, which is 6, and then 9 and 12. So that it becomes a scalable tactic instead of something which is, let's just do this for 3 months and then see where we go. Right. So we try and give some part of the projection that, okay, let's plan out how this is going to look. And the best example at this point that we give to anybody that we're working with is the HubSpot pillar cluster approach. It took 3 years for them to simply just align their content in such a way that it becomes clear to the audience, this is what they do. That's HubSpot. After it was a success. So somebody who's just getting started, expecting results immediately like HubSpot, I'm like, go back, check.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think that's one of the approach we take towards content marketing. And then, of course, the standard things follow, wherein there's a keyword research, there's a content marketing calendar, and then it comes down to execution. So, which is the writing part, which most commonly is called content marketing, but all the time that's taken before that, that's actually the key marketing strategy part.
So I love the fact that you mentioned timing, because I think that's something that a lot of people, especially with marketing in general, but with content even more so, they feel like, oh, we published that, like what's happening? Where are all the people? Where are all the clients? What's happening? And I love the way that sometimes you even have exactly that. Sometimes you have people giving examples with like huge names, and they're like, look at, they just came out of nowhere, and any of those cases, you actually look, scroll down to any of their content types. You go to their YouTube, you go to their blog, you go to their whatever, and you see oftentimes years of content that you only see now. Like you didn't see it then, and I don't think probably not many people saw it then, but now it's like overnight success.
Yeah. I think that's why because the new age marketers, I would call them, and it's a very this thing in our team itself, right? So we try and pull the Gen Z's leg on, hey, you skipped the part. They call us that you guys are working unnecessarily hard. Or we tell them that, hey, you skipped this part. So if I cross question you on something as to how did this person become an overnight success, you can't answer it for me, right? Those kind of things do happen. A lot of these new age marketers are skipping on the competitor analysis. If you did that, you would know if somebody was an overnight success. You would know if they saw a dip in a certain year. You would know exactly the framework that worked for them. But nobody does that. And that's why I think even company stakeholders then just stand on the marketer's head and be like, hey, we published that page 5 days ago. There's no traffic on it. Why is it not crawled? Why is it not ranking for a certain thing? I mean, we have one of those instances wherein we made the blogs rank pretty quickly for a certain topic. And they're like, but we want the web page to rank. And the web page is nearly 300 words on the internet where you're competing with so much of volume. We made the blog, the content related to the page rank. It's relevant. Give it some breathing room. I mean, you can't expect thousands of people coming onto it. And but that's how much we can explain. It's usually just a lost cause.
Yeah, that's wow. I guess that's oftentimes the problem. Yeah, when I mean the education part of like you have to educate people. That's a funny thing because I had that when I had a software company and we were building software and websites, and I oftentimes give it as an example, but I see it across industry all the time where people come to you and they pay you for something that you're good at, they've chosen you to do it, and then they start trying to tell you how to do it. And then at some point, like if you give up, actually say, okay, I'm just gonna do it the way you said, then it'll be, haha, it's not working. It's yeah.
I'm using this excerpt to give it to people because many a times we get reached out and they're like, hey, we need to fix this, and I think you can. And then the moment we start working on it and the needle moves in a positive way, then come the inputs and the feedback and the opinions, and then the entire strategy derails. And that's why I say document it, because 3 months down the line, they will tell you, hey, you did this. And they will entirely forget that they were the ones who asked for it. So now whenever that there is a pivot in the content marketing strategy, I document the date, the person who requested it, notes, and what exactly that person said verbatim right there. Because as marketers, we need to trace back as to why a pivot happened. And you can't, I mean, I can't explain it. If you're not listening and you really want me to do an end-to-end kind of thing, okay, but that's your call. This is recorded.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good way to handle it. So I guess as a message out there, people, like when you pay somebody, just, to do a good job, leave them do their job because that's what you're paying for. Cool. Last question. Because I don't want to hold you up for much longer, but I do want to ask you about naming and domains, since we focus on that, on smart branding. Does it affect? How does it play into the whole content strategy mix? Where do you see it, and how important is it?
Again, coming back to what goals you've set, that impacts how you pick your domain as well. I'll give you an instance. For example, my company's name is Contensify, right? It's a brand name. So a domain name also has to be extremely clear. Although there are now companies that have named, taken up domains with, say, content marketing agency. I'm sure you must have seen plenty of them, right? Mm-hmm. And then the name is entirely different, but the domain is entirely different. I mean, I get it. It's a good SEO hack, but it's not going to add up in the long run because you've technically diluted your brand. Similarly, my name, I knew that I can call myself a B2B marketer in the domain, but I need people to know me by my name. Otherwise, if you type in B2B marketer, there are practically thousands of people that come up. There's a very high chance I'm not going to show up there. Right? Again, I pick my name. So I feel the domain that you do pick up has to be something that you visualize in the long term, adding up towards your business goals and objectives. It cannot be something today and then something else tomorrow, because a redirect sounds very easy to do otherwise. But the audience that you build on that domain and the domain age, right, you lose it all when you start with the redirect. I feel that there are too many people who are like, hey, it's fine, we'll just pick a domain and then we'll pivot eventually if it doesn't work in our favor. No, give it more thought, right? Give it more thought, even if it takes more time. If you're establishing a brand and there are going to be services, let's say, or products under it, go with a brand name. Be absolutely crystal clear about, what the brand is called. You don't want to mix it up with other terms because people can confuse. And what if you pivot? If I called Contensify content marketing, and then eventually I into becoming an advertising agency, I have practically left no room in my domain. I've messed up right there. Okay? So I'm going to have to change it all over again or create another one. So definitely depending on where you see yourself going and what your domain name is supposed to help you achieve. Picking out domain name is important. Don't skip on research there. Don't just pick a random phrase that sounds good right now, but you've not checked trends on, you've not checked patterns on how, that phrase has been evolving over the years. Because as you start executing, it may narrow down your audience, it may broaden your audience, or it may absolutely kill your audience, right? So you have to pay attention to the domain name. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think like oftentimes when I talk to people, they're like, should I do this? Should I do that? And we come to what you were saying at the beginning about content and strategy. It's like there's no one thing that's good for everybody else, and you don't do that with so many things, and then people try to do that with business. It's like, no, it really depends. And I think the best advice there would be that to just take it seriously, take the time to think about it and think about where you're going next, and that would help define both your domain and your content strategy.
Exactly. Yes.
Great. Well, that's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for being a guest. We'll include all the ways people can reach you in the write-up for the podcast. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It was lovely talking to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in this episode of Smart Branding Podcast. Feel free to visit smartbranding.com for more information and reach out if you have any suggestions, questions, ideas, or just want to learn more about how a good domain name strategy can help you build a strong and successful brand. See you next time.